Hello and welcome to GST&U. I'm Chaiti Narula, and today's episode of GST&U takes stock of the situation after the GST regime comes in. An array of questions really come up. How has the transition really been? How has the migration really been? What kind of tax collections and compliances are we seeing in our country after the GST regime has kicked in? Taking stock of the situation today is Dr. Jayjeet Bhattacharya, partner of KPMG on GST&U. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhattacharya, for joining us as always on the show. So let's start off with the first question, and that's the question on everybody's mind. How has the migration really been? How has the transition been? Seems like it's been quite seamless for now.
It's seamless from the government's perspective, but as was expected, any migration of this magnitude will have pain, and it will not be a one-off pain. It will not. It's not a call that I can take in September and say it's been smooth or not smooth.
Right.
It was expected to be painful. It will be painful. There are underlying currents that are happening on the ground, and that process will happen. It's inevitable. You cannot bypass that process.
So far you've seen that the government has been extending the tax deadline as well. So it looks like the government is going very easy on all the players right now and giving them enough room and buffer for tax compliance as well.
No, absolutely, and that is a role that was expected from the government. As we said, the transition will be painful for people. It's been smooth for the government, so the government have handled its systems and processes well. So it's smooth for the government. So at least that part is taken care of. But as we all know, that will be painful for people who do not understand this new system. And therefore, rightly so, the government is mollycoddling and grandfathering all the businesses which need to then transition and come to the system. And therefore, all the deadlines that are being pushed back, they're important. Having said that, it's still important to push these deadlines and also forcefully push that these are sacrosanct deadlines, and then do a dipstick check that are people being able to cope up. And if the outcome is that the people are not able to cope up, then reconsidering those deadlines and pushing them is a natural part of any transition.
So as far as the GST network is concerned, any kind of teething problems that one is facing filing taxes on the GST network, I know that the large corporates are taken care of. I know that bigger firms are taken care of because firms like you help them out. We've spoken last time about the SME and MSME sector, and more so the smaller service providers as well, the sole proprietors as well. What is the teething issue with the GST portal that are coming up at this point of time?
So, there have been many solutions that were created to link back to the government APIs. KPMG had its own solution which did extremely well in helping out.
I ask this because I do believe that there have been issues on that front.
That's right. So all of these solutions were there, but they have to latch on to the government APIs, the GST APIs. Unfortunately, some of the GST APIs were not working. So that has been an issue and a hiccup. So those who moved into these solutions, they're also facing a problem because the solution is not smoothly filing the returns because the APIs, which is the IT system, is not working very well. That will get eventually fixed. And in the meantime, people have to go to the portal and then manually enter it or use some kind of a mechanism to enter each of their returns on the portal. So even for large firms, that's been a bit of a hiccup, but as you rightly said, they have the manpower and the capability to solve it. For the smaller entities, while they're still trying to figure out how to file GST and what is GST and where will they get the returns and how will they manage the tax credit and so on, they are still facing this last minute problem of where to really file it because APIs and the softwares are not working. And in that context, it's been a challenge. And of course, it will all get resolved as you move forward.
Also, you have just these many CAs in the country, and you've got the entire country wanting to be GST compliant as well. So do you see that as an issue going forward? Like right now, the government has not cracked the whip on the ones that are not being compliant. But going forward, do you see an array of litigations, chaos, pandemonium, a lot of stress in the market as far as compliance is concerned?
No, I wouldn't put it that as extreme in that sense, that I wouldn't see a pandemonium in that sense. It's a process of...
There are only these many CAs, there are only these many lawyers. The lawyers are not understanding the indirect tax regime. Most of the lawyers I'm talking to are not being able to interpret the GST law as well. And you've got a man who's got a turnover of 50,000 rupees per month, say. He's not going to be able to pay 7,000 rupees just for the CA to become tax compliant. What happens to this fragmented market?
Right, so let me just take the first point or your last point on the 50,000 rupee turnover person. Well, the good news is that he or she need not be GST compliant because he or she is outside of the GST tax net. you need to have a turnover of over 20 lakhs to
be able to, yes.
file the tax.
Yes.
But having said
I
that,
mean, loosely speaking, say maybe more than 50. Still, it is tough for that man to afford a
Absolutely,
CA on a
yes.
month-on-month basis.
Absolutely, yes, because even a 20 lakh turnover is not a very large turnover.
Not a large turnover.
Because even with a 10% margin, that turns out to be 2 lakhs per annum
Right.
of real income coming to that person. So it's very little we are talking about. And therefore your question is absolutely valid in that sense. And let's look at the numbers. The pre-GST, there were about 6 million people who were registered to pay indirect taxes. Post-GST, that number has shot up to roughly 9 million. And that's a success story because more people have come under the tax net. And it's expected to go up to 10 million. Within that, about 1.5 million have some kind of an IT tool, and the rest, which is about 8.5 billion, do not have any IT tool to support them. And how many CAs do we have? We have about roughly 1,80,000 CAs in this country. So you've got a very small number of CAs trying to help out this large number of taxpayers.
Right. So what is the solution to all of this now? You think the Finance Ministry has a plan of action, the GST Council has a plan of action, all these questions that are coming up after the GST regime kicked in, the on-ground realities were very different from perhaps what was drawn on the canvas and the narrative that they painted. How do you bridge that gap? What is the solution in your opinion?
So I would say that this was expected. It's not that it's a surprise to the government or anyone else. You can't be delaying something. If something has to be done, it has to be done. GST was needed for the economy. Politically, there was an alignment, and it was prudent to bring it in as quickly as possible before the misalignment happened again. And it was necessary for the nation to have this. Having said that, yes, there's a problem. And as I said, even though your first question was that is this a smooth transition, and the answer was no. It was not expected to be a smooth transition. It will not be a smooth transition. But there has not been any big bloopers from the government or anyone else. So to that extent, yes, it's going as per the expected pain, but not more than the expected pain.
The government also said we will be bringing more people under the tax bracket and it's overall good for the economy as well. So has that happened? Because the numbers right now are suggesting perhaps, but that's just data as you rightly mentioned to me offline. What is your sense of that?
So let's take up the data point of it. Some 92,000 crores have been collected. However, it does not compare.
They beat the target of 90,000.
They beat the target, right? But the beat the target, let me take the target issue a little later.
Okay.
Let me just look at the core figure of 92,000 crores. The right apples to apples comparison is this VAT or GST collection compared to the previous VAT collection plus all the other taxes that were subsumed. There's the entertainment tax and 100 other tax that were subsumed under it. That comparison hasn't happened. So if you compare it, maybe the figures wouldn't be as good.
This is not the right benchmark of comparison in any case to begin with.
No, it's not. But it just shows that it's been healthy, that it's not been less than the expected number. Just so that we interpret correctly. What it shows is that we don't have an immediate problem in hand at all because the total number is more than the expected number. However, it does not mean that the total tax was actually more than the previous tax collection, right?
Correct.
Also, this number does not factor in all the input tax credits that are still pending to be claimed. Does this mean that GST has been a success? Now, GST success is not in terms of tax collected. GST success will be seen in terms of the positive impact it has on the economy and the jobs. And that won't happen in 1 quarter or 1 month or 1 week. It will at least take a year for us to understand whether the impact of GST is happening or not.
And I know in your personal capacity, you've always been very pro-GST. Whenever we've spoken, you've been pro-GST. You've always said it is good for the economy as well. But your one concern, however, even the last time when we spoke on CNN News 18 was that you could see perhaps short-term inflationary pressure on the economy. So it is good news that that hasn't happened?
The short-term inflation hasn't happened. Not because of GST per se directly, because other factors, because there was destocking that happened before GST. So once the supply goes down and the demand also goes down in tandem because of the demonetization that happened before that, then your inflation gets impacted, right? So if your demand has also fallen, then you will not have the inflation that you were
Is that healthy for the economy?
That's a different question, but let me just add one more part to it, is that the other reason why we haven't seen an immediate inflation, even though we were expecting some profiteering to happen, is because possibly the anti-profiteering law has had a moderating effect. Otherwise, people would not have reduced the prices when the GST went down, and if they had not reduced the prices, then the total impact would have been higher, and therefore there would have been an inflation. So the anti-profiteering law also played a role in making sure that inflation did not happen.
Going forward in the next 1 year, do you see there being an impact on the inflation numbers, on the growth figures, overall GDP? We've seen a 1% markdown on the GDP as well. What is your sense? How will GST go down on these numbers, particularly GST?
On the
inflation, on the growth figures and the GDP numbers.
Let me take the inflation first. So if it's ceteris paribus, which is all things being equal,
right,
then absolutely there's no reason why inflation will come down, because the cost in the economy is taken out.
Correct.
If it takes me 7 days to drive a truck from Delhi to Chennai, and now because of GST I can do it in 4 to 5 days or less, then obviously I'm saving that much of fuel. I'm saving that much of trucking cost. I'm also saving that much of holding cost in a way around, and I'll pass that benefit. So clearly the cost will come down and inflation will not happen. But however, if at the same time you see the festival season is coming in, because the festival season demand will go up. If demand goes up, then obviously there will be an element of inflation that will be there.
Right.
So there will be an upward pressure on the pricing, while there's a downward pressure because of the GST being introduced. What the final figure will be a mix of all of these drivers of inflation.
Recently, the finance minister hinted that eventually they would knock off the outliers perhaps and keep only 2 tax brackets. You see that happening in a hurry? And also with the 2 tax brackets, are you a critic of the 2 tax brackets, and would you just like to see that one utopian tax that is charged, which is one nation, one tax?
Absolutely, Chaiti. There needs to be one tax, and that would have reduced the complexity of implementation. Though I understand the compulsions of the government, so I'm not saying the government should have done this way or that way. They had their own constraints, and the government
demographics of India permitted or not is the question.
There was demographics. There was it's a federal structure, so the states needs to have a say, and so on and so forth. And we need to make sure that at the end of the day sufficient revenues are collected so that that's distributed between the states and the central government. Otherwise, the utopian would be have no tax.
What do you think is the solution to bring many more people into the tax bracket? Because as much as we've seen a lot of compliance, which is very surprising that the compliance numbers have been high, there has been a lot of non-compliance from people who are still absolutely have no clue how to be tax compliant. What is your solution for that? It's just an opinion from your side.
So, first of all, the structure of GST is that it's a viral structure. It leverages what is called the network effect. Which essentially means that if we are in the same economy and you are not part of this network, then I can't talk to you. I can't do business with you.
That guy gets pushed out of the system completely.
Absolutely. So if I am using a GSM phone network and you are using some other standard, then no matter what service provider you use, I can't talk to you. It's pretty much the same way in terms of GST. You need to be part of the same network to be able to do business, right? So the adoption will be taken care of just by the structure of how GST is. It has got a network effect, and that will kick in. Now, in terms of what are the initiatives the government should be doing, I think as long as you make adoption very simple and we reduce the tax rates to that one tax rate that we're talking about, I think adoption will go through the roof, because the more I'm talking to MSMEs, and I'm working quite closely in Bihar, what people are responding is that please tax me more, but get me one tax and get me clarity, and I'm happy to pay.
That's the ground reality?
That's what I'm hearing again and again from MSMEs. Please tell me one tax, even if it's higher, and just get off with it, because I don't have the bandwidth to do business and also pay tax.
So firms like you must put pressure on the government to make sure this happens for the ease of doing business in India.
Absolutely, just like media like you should be putting pressure on the government to do the same. We need to work together.
Right. Also, we were talking last time, remember, about how there would be tax terrorism, is the GST law draconian or not? Of course, we haven't seen that ground reality. It's just been 2 months. It's too early to tell, but what is your sense going forward? Because once they're lapsing the deadlines, but once all of that have been met with, you see the law being draconian in nature.
Yeah, so I think the government is adopting that kind of a policy in many fronts, not just GST. If you look at linking your phone number to Aadhaar, again, there is a Damocles sword that's been hanging, but people are not able to meet the deadlines. So the government will wait till a sizable number of people have complied, and then I wouldn't call it tax tourism, then the screws will be tightened from the tax perspective by the government, and that's how it has to be. Otherwise, why should a few people pay taxes and others shouldn't? And at some point in time, that switchover, that complete switchover needs to happen, and sooner the better. So it's a matter of time. As soon as there is a sizable number of people who are compliant, the government will then start going aggressively and make sure that everybody else is compliant through penalties and other stick kind of mechanisms.
All right, that's fantastic. Your closing thoughts now on the way forward as far as GST is concerned.
I think GST is, I will repeat, is a very important piece of reform that was badly needed. It's not a simple reform. It will not be easy to have, but we simply need to keep our head down and work on it, keep identifying the issues, make sure that the vulnerable sections of the industry, which is MSMEs, do not get impacted or at least impacted, and work with the government to ensure that we are completely compliant to GST and switch over to a tax which will lead to more growth and more jobs for all of us.
And keep putting pressure on the government to bring the tax slabs down, the number of tax slabs down.
Keep working with the government to make sure the slabs become one single slab.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Bhattacharya, for joining us on the show. With that, we're going to take a quick break right here on GST, and you on the other side, some commonly and frequently asked questions answered. Stay with us right here on CNN News 18. Ever since the GST regime really kicked in, there have been a lot of frequently asked questions, a lot of impediments on ground, while companies and firms and service providers and individual sole proprietors are also facing while filing their returns. Let's get a sense from Tejas Goenka from Tally as to what these queries are and how he would like to resolve them. So a lot of customers have used your software and they found it really beneficial to filing their GST returns as well. So what is the kind of usual feedback that you're getting from the customers that are using Tally? Because of course this is helping them go a long way in sorting out the impediments and ironing off the creases while filing returns as well.
Sure. So the response has been overwhelming. I think our existing customers, that's what we've been focusing on over the last 2-3 months. They've been very, very happy. I think we've made life a little bit simpler for them. That's been the feedback. It's also been a lot more than we anticipated. Honestly speaking, if we asked customers, what are you thinking about GST in April or May? Most responses would have been, let's wait and watch. The moment July hit, we saw an incredible response to, I need new software, I need to learn how to bill, I need to learn how to file, what is an HSM code, what is CGST, SGST. So I think in the first 2 months, the adoption of GST itself was much, much faster than we anticipated. The second thing is that I do believe that it will take us a few quarters for the country to settle. I don't know what those few quarters are. But we have to go through 2 or 3 complete filing periods, including getting the mismatch report to figure out actually how much input credit we've been able to get or not in order to become comfortable with the law itself. So this has been the response till now. If I was to look at some of the concerns that I've got, I think all the little stuff that we've been facing, I think there's a lot more to come. GSTR1 is not the hard part. So the advice that I would give to everybody is, again, 2 things, that please try and digitize as early as possible. There are a whole bunch of businesses that haven't digitized yet, that are waiting. A lot of them believe that it's a tax consultant's responsibility to digitize because that's how they've been running. But the earlier you do it, the easier it's going to be for you.
Mr. Goenka, compliance has been the concern ever since GST regime has kicked in. 2 months have already passed. Would you be able to paint the lay of the land as to how the next few months going forward are going to be like as far as the compliance is concerned? So paint the lay of the land as far as the landscape of GST compliance is concerned in the country.
The response in the first few months has been phenomenal. I think the government has done a phenomenal job in making sure that businesses are compliant. The tone has been more or less positive about how GST has been implemented in the country. I would agree with that. Looking at the ground also, while there has been certain confusion, I think overall we've been doing a good job. Return filing headaches were anticipated, problems, concerns were anticipated. I do think that if we go through the first few cycles, we will be a much more compliant India than we were.
Also, what would be your solution for the problems and the impediments that the companies are going through? A few exceptional scenarios that are coming out after the GST regime has kicked in and after one tries to file the returns. If you could just walk us through a few of these.
Sure. So since this is early days in GST and just the first filing periods that are coming, I think the biggest thing that businesses are wanting is automation, that something should just help me automate all these requirements. The problem is that the moment it's automated, you lose control. It's very difficult to keep control on your data and what you're filing. So the big message that I would have is exceptions are guaranteed to happen. You need to be able to automate your systems such that you have control over these exceptions. That's number one. Number two is do reach out to your chartered accountants, do reach out to your tax consultants to understand what kind of exceptions you need to manage and how to manage. And on the software side, I don't want to really market Tally per se, but do try and see if you want to attend one of our events. They will help. A lot of people have said that it's helped them manage GST for their business as well. So two things, keep control and seek advice.
Alright, that's it from me, Chaiti Narula, on this episode of GST and you. Hope those views, those comments and all the expert advice goes a long way in help you file your returns. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for your time.